Calling to order this special call meeting of the Sabine Board of Trustees on June the 1st at 4 p.m. We have a quorum of all members present, and this notice was posted in compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. If you'll stand for the invocation and the pledge. Celebrates our love for our military men and women. Thank you for those that are willing to sacrifice their lives. And thank you especially for any member of the service that is present with us tonight. We especially ask blessings on them and their family. And Father, I know you as the great physician. Thank you for that you're able to heal when even man has given up on that. So a special thank you for the healing that has taken place in the lives of so many people here tonight. And then I thank you finally that you love this world of ours so much that you sent your Son. And for this we will be eternally grateful. I ask these blessings in the name of your Son. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Since this is not a regular meeting, we do not have an open forum tonight. That takes place only at the regular board meeting.
It's on the agenda. Did you approve the agenda? Did you approve the agenda?
Yes, Bryce wrote it and
You approved it. It's approved. Did you not approve the agenda?
yes. Mr. Hardy, do you want to comment on that? Certainly.
This is Mr. Hardy, the school attorney.
Good evening. I ordinarily wouldn't stand up, but a lot of people here in a large room. I've not reviewed the district policy on this. I understand some board members say that we don't have an open forum, a special call meeting. However, the point is well made that it is on the agenda. I would ask this, that the point may be irrelevant by our policy. Has anyone signed up to speak in open forum tonight?
Mr. Daniel has been bringing that list to me, and since he didn't serve that purpose tonight, I assume that the open forum was on there by mistake.
Sorry. It's actually a little hard to hear you from over here. They can all hear us, but I'm sorry, was there a sign up?
There was a sign-up sheet.
Is anybody on the sign-up sheet?
Not to my knowledge, no.
In that case, the sign-up sheet ordinarily closes at the...
Who has it? Okay, back there, I don't know, I had the one in our office.
The one on the sign-in sheet said that if you wanted to see, we're supposed to talk with you.
Okay, she's going to get the sign-in sheet.
And I had it one quick question, that's all. And I'll-
Well, okay, please wait, but it'll take her just a few minutes to get it. Here's our policy.
Just for the board's knowledge, as well as anybody in the public that's interested, your policy does provide that there shall be an open forum at regular meetings. It does not prohibit an open forum at a special meeting. Because an open forum has been indicated on the agenda for tonight, and is not prohibited by policy, it would not be by default. But since it is there, I would recommend that it go forward.
Thank you.
Hey Stacy, who was it that put the open form on there? Who put it on there?
We did, I guess, my office did. Well, myself and Tracy and Martha approved it. I mean,
Well, there were several issues with the agenda this time, and one of them is that the board members didn't receive a copy of it, as we normally do, and we just had to look for it on the school's website. But nevertheless, there have been many times that something has been posted on the agenda that we have passed over, but Ms. Raymond would like to ask a question, I believe that says.
I think I can make my voice heard without benefit of the microphone. I just have one simple question. I question how any member of that board, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, can make any decisions on behalf of all the taxpayers and the citizens, and yet refuse to answer any pertinent questions that might be relative to that decision when asked by both the citizens and other board members. You don't even have to give me answers, because I know you don't have to today.
Thank you, Ms. Raymond. And moving into the discussion items, the first item is a budget workshop.
Okay, just want to open up by saying this board meeting originally was supposed to be a budget workshop. Thank you. Okay, we do have, we want to open it up as far as the budget workshop is concerned to go over budgets for next year. Because this is, of course, not the final night that we'll look at the budget. But I will ask Mr. Yandel to go ahead and cover the part that he's going to cover, and all of you should have that, should have information at your places.
Thank you, Mr. Bryce. If you look at the very top page that's in front of you, that's labeled Proposed Budget Recap for Workshop, has three headings: regular budget, special project, and total. I broke this out in this manner because if you recall, we have a special project this year for the repair of the middle school roof that's been estimated at $260,000. Currently, the school has in their designated fund balance an amount just under $260,000 specifically for repairs of school buildings. So this has already been set aside in the fund balance to be spent in the fund balance. So my recommendation would be that the board go ahead and use this part of the fund balance to set aside for this for a special project. If you do that, then that leaves the remainder of the budget as the regular budget to be paid be dealt with either through the revenue that's generated or fund balance if needed. And if you look down at the about 2/3 of the way down, you'll see a line that says net revenue over or under expenditures. In the regular budget column, it has $155,340. In the middle column, it has a negative $260,000. And in the far right-hand column, it has a negative $104,660. So if you add the two of them together, when the board adopts the budget, the expenditures that will be in the budget will be the $11,091,000 if this were the final budget. But $260,000 of that is going to be coming out of fund balance if the board approves it to be done that way. So when we get later in the meeting to talking about the impact of the raises of the different groups on the budget, if you take the special project out of the picture because it's coming out of fund balance, then we could really say that we're starting off with $155,000 ahead and work from there, deciding how much of a raise that you're going to be giving to the different employees. You'll look at the, after the very back page in the stack that you have is the 2016-17 pay raise options. The only thing I want to show you is down in the bottom where it says general fund only, you'll see the $104,660. If the board opts to take the middle school roof repair out of fund balance, we basically could plug in $155,000 there instead of $104,000. But that's where that $104,000 number comes from. That's the only reason I wanted to refer to that page at this point. Since our meeting on May the 16th, I went in and filled in all of the payroll budget, filled in a lot of the expenses that are not directly related to specific individuals. And then I also put in all the individuals, moved the teachers up 1 year in their steps, and moved the employees that had been here for a part of the year, bumped them to where they would be in the budget for a full year instead of just part of the year. That budget at this point is on that first page that we've looked at. Right in the middle is $8,252,000. The non-payroll expenditures are a combination of the $2,578,000 and the $260,000 for the middle school roof. There have only been a few minor changes to the non-payroll budget, and we'll get to them on the third sheet that we looked at. Are there any questions on this particular sheet? Okay, if you'll go to the next sheet that is sideways, at the very top of it says account code inquiry summary, and is in real small print. The board has asked for more detail of what goes into making up the general fund budget, so this one sheet is all of the revenue accounts that go into making up the revenue budget for the general fund. It includes all of the tax revenues, all of the other miscellaneous local revenue, the state foundation revenue, the TRS on behalf state revenue, and then the federal revenue that we get from the SHARS program. Totaling down at the very bottom right-hand corner, $10,986,949. Board members have any questions on the revenue budget? The numbers for the tax revenue and the state revenue were the same as what we had talked about in the middle of May. You go to the third page.
Hold on, give me 2 seconds.
Sure. Okay, the only column that you really need to worry about is 2 columns from the right that says 2016-17 next year revenue. That is at this juncture, our proposed revenue budget.
Okay. The next year, do you have any questions? Okay.
The next spreadsheet that we're going to look at is one that you saw at the May meeting, which is the budget worksheet, Fund 1999 payroll recap that has all the campuses and departments listed out on the left-hand side. This is basically the same as we looked at in May. With the only difference is if you look in the very bottom center of the page, you'll see it says changes. The $2,827,000 number was the total that was at the bottom of that page when we looked at the proposed budget in the May meeting. There have been 3 small requests since then from the Strutters for new uniforms. There's a requirement that we related to the Child Nutrition Department providing alternative meals that the general fund has to cover the expense for, that's $650. And then the consultant to help set up the foundation that the board has approved is going to cost approximately $8,500. So those are the 3 things that have changed since we looked at the budget, at the non-payroll part of the budget in May. Are there any questions on that?
Well, could we take just a few minutes and look these pages over?
I have a question, Mr. Daniel, please. Could you tell me what kinds of things come out of the Director of Director of Business Operations, the $135,200? Just tell me what kinds of things come out of that.
Get to my page here this minute.
Could you tell us where the information is that you're questioning?
This is on the budget worksheet that he just referenced.
In the detailed spreadsheets that you got at the May meeting, it includes the cost of the annual audit, the cost to pay Grant County for collecting taxes, the cost of purchasing co-op of Region 7, business office supplies, business office travel, liability insurance, the Guiding Stars banquet.
You can pay that?
Well, it falls under. Yeah, I really could give that to Shelley, but I was trying to be nice. Yeah, there's $10,000 in the budget for the data processing expense for Region 7, and then $80,000 that we pay annually to the appraisal district for the appraisal cost. And that makes up the $131,000.
Now, all of those detailed reports for this page that we're looking at currently, those detailed reports were given at our last board meeting.
Okay, I think I have it right here.
I got a quick question, just because it brought up, just curiosity more than anything else. You said that the Region 7, but what about our Region 8? Do we not have an agreement this year with Region 8?
No, that was with part of the food service. No, everything's gone with Region 7.
Okay, everything's Region 7.
Right.
Okay. It just struck me that what was missing.
Yes.
That would have been coming out of child nutrition.
It is just a.
Kevin, what's the difference in cost for the new facility for graduation versus the one we had for years?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you from over here.
It's hard to hear you.
I love it.
Can somebody tell me that?
What's the difference between the cost of graduation at Laterno this year versus graduation at Kilgore College last year?
I'm thinking, let me see. I'm thinking that the rental at Kilgore College was less than $1,000. If I remember correctly, it's $4,000 for Laterna.
So one of our first decisions will be tonight whether or not to change these pay scales and then determine a raise.
Correct.
I have a comment about the sheet you gave us last time. I noticed that our staff travel has increased significantly. Are we going to do more traveling, or is the cost greater? Is it a combination of both? I mean, in some instances, it's double, so what are we doing with that?
There are some travel accounts that are going to be moved for this next year because of requirements for teachers related to the advanced placement programs at the high school. And I believe the dyslexia program has some additional travel as well that's going to be in there. And there's just some of the other seminars that they've gone to have been so productive, we're taking more teachers to them, I believe, as part of it. Isn't that correct?
And two of the new ones, one of them is the fact that we'll offer calculus this next year, and the teacher has to go to training for that. And also in our AP history, we will have a new teacher teaching that, or a different teacher teaching that, and she will be going to that AP training. Just clarification, Mr. Gandel said something about the $2,800 for Strutter uniforms. And that's, you know, I'm sure we have parents out there that are parents of some of these girls, and what it is, it's definitely, y'all know that doesn't pay for uniforms, all the uniforms. It's a partial part of the uniform, so that Ms. Barnes brought to us.
Okay, my question is from last meeting, and on the superintendent page, could you just give me an example of what's included under school board miscellaneous? It's the last line on that page.
I know it's not one of the bigger items, but that comes out of there as your meals, at each one of the meetings, comes out of there. There are some of the, annual dues to, TASB that I believe come out of there. I'm not,
Has the convention?
not, the travel to the convention would come out of the, 6419 account that's on there, that has a $10,000 balance for budget for next year. But, I don't recall off the top of my head, without anyone looking, what all makes up that account.
I'm not looking at it, but is that employee of the month that comes out of there? Or-
I don't know if it would come out of the school board, that might come out of yours.
Under the superintendents, there's one item that says superintendent. What comes out of that? It just says superintendent.
Where are you?
This is on the budget worksheet for the superintendent,
That's,
the
this
item.
is supplies for, Mr. Bryce and Tracy, in running the superintendent's office.
Okay,
They for both just being the superintendent and also being the district's HR department at the same time.
thank you.
What did we, budget for, less of a gate at the football games, George?
Because we had less
Less
football,
games.
we had less revenue that came in this last year than what was budgeted.
Was trending down.
And I would prefer to budget conservatively, going into the year and having more money come in than budget high and revenue not come in.
Kevin, on that same page, there's a pretty good increase on the top line. Superintendent, administration, and legal. What is,
The legal fees, that the district has paid out, legal fees this year have gone up drastically from prior years for various reasons, having to do with contracts, having to do with, different topics that the attorneys have had to be consulted about. And, I've had to reallocate budgeted money within function 41 to cover, the legal fees that we've already spent thus far this year. So that's why we increased it this next year, so we wouldn't have to do that.
is that, do we get any kind of line item info on those bills as far as who's contacting and who's incurring those?
That from his office, when we're using Mr. Hardy, yes, they'll send us, well, any attorney, they'll send us a line item on the cost, like a phone call.
Right.
If I call to ask them for something, it will be on there. If Ms. Wright calls, it's on there, those type of things. Now, talking about contracts, that's kind of like what we were talking about last meeting. It's contracts with, like in this year, the abatement company, and those type of things. And those contracts, like that, the service contracts or the construction contracts, those type of things go through, if y'all remember, go through Jay Youngblood, and he also will send a detail on that. So we have all of that.
He's in the middle of reviewing the loan agreement that we were going to enter into with SECO for the HVAC grant. He's already looked at it once, and we've sent it back to SECO and gotten them to change some things. We just haven't gotten the corrected loan agreement back for him to look at it tonight.
I'm still on that same page. What about board rentals? That was a significant increase. Is that for these microphones and all?
That's for the portable sound system to enable us to have the meetings in the gym. The district is looking at the now that we're meeting in here, we may or may not need, the same type of portable sound system. So Mr. Bryce and Mr. Cox are looking into the possibility of the district maybe even purchasing our own system. If that's what that's for. I believe it's at a cost of about $400 per meeting.
And if we move them all in here when we need to, then the cost will be a little less than that, which Mr. Cox and I have been looking at that. He's working with, the vendors on that to see what he can get that for.
Mr. Yandel, I appreciate all this information. It is helpful based on what we've had in past years. I think that something the board needs to consider doing is having a session where we look for opportunities to save some money for this district, and where there might be places to diminish it. I would see several places where the supply budget would go down, but the travel budget would go up. Things like that. So, and I know that does happen from time to time. But if there's a place where we could do things differently and save some money, I think that would be something to look at. I didn't know that the board was spending so much on miscellaneous.
Well, that's part of our process. We go to the teachers first, ask them what they need, as far as supplies, as far as travel. And then they give that to the campus principal, and he or she does the same thing. And then when it gets to Kevin, then we look at it and look at, percentages of increase or decrease from previous years and see what the causes are. And so it's definitely adjusted. And, the thing about it is it's adjusted year to year based on the needs. And needs, first and foremost, of course, personnel is the largest cost. Then after that, the needs are to make sure that our staff is trained well to do their job, and that's part of what we're looking at with our AP courses at the high school with those two new ones. Training on some of those are certainly expensive. It's a one-time cost, if that teacher stays in place. If you have changes, then sometimes you may have to do it more than once a year, but in most cases,
Okay, we had some elementary classrooms that were nearing the limit last year. I don't know whatever happened to those room populations, but are we anticipating needing more sections in our elementary school?
We're definitely looking at needing another kindergarten teacher. Our kindergarten. Our numbers are to the point already that it looks like it's going to dictate that. Which kindergarten is the most difficult level to predict, of course, and we've done the roundup and all of that already, and those numbers are large, and that's not even counting the registration that we're going to have, early or in August. And so it looks like those numbers are probably going to dictate us adding another sixth grade kindergarten teacher. And the other grade levels, we will look at those, we're looking at those numbers now. There's some large ones. Some of the issues with those they're on the border to where, if you add another teacher, it will make a difference in that grade level, but of course not all of them. So, the decision's gonna come in, okay, are you gonna have to add 4 more teachers, at one whack? Well, probably not, but we also are looking at our numbers to make sure that, that's not gonna be the case. There could be a situation that where we decide, okay, if we continue to get new kids enrolling, we may have to add another teacher at one of those grade levels. But kindergarten is probably gonna be a definite.
Possibly one more.
Right.
Kevin, this is probably an easy question for you. What do you mean by normal accounts? Is that just something that's always existed?
Routine expenditures and not capital outlay or not an expenditure that happens every 2 to 3 years, such as election expenditures and that kind of thing.
Are we all ready to look at these pay scales? Well, we've had some questions to ask Mr. Franklin. Mr. Yandel, I know the last time these were adjusted was in 2014, is that correct?
Actually, 2013 was the last time the pay scales were adjusted. The reason that it was changed in 2014 was related to changes within the business office because of changes in staff and changes in the positions. But the actual scales themselves were adopted back in June of 2013.
So you can begin with these two documents. Is there anything you want to tell us about these two documents? I mean, you've already said something, but is there anything more now that we're focusing on them?
The only thing, I mean, I'll start off and Mr. Yandel can continue, but I know, Ms. Pickle, you asked at the last board meeting about the boxes, and there's, you know, the boxes are here. Every employee in the district is in a box, assigned to a box of pay grade. So you see the 3 pages there. This was initially adopted. TASB came in and helped us adopt this. So every job description is on a pay grade, and it has a minimum, a midpoint, and a max. And every now and then you have to adjust the boxes to keep up with the rate of pay, the market value rate of pay. So we didn't adjust in the last 2 years, so that's what we're looking at maybe needing to adjust this time. So what you see here is everyone in the district, not by name, but every position listed. And that's the first page as it is now. The second page is a proposed box or boxes, and that is just adding 7.5%, I believe it was, what it came, 7.5% to each one of these, so you continue to stay up with the market value of the jobs.
Are you expanding the box, or are you stretching it wider, or are you just scooting it over 7.5%?
Like the minimum will increase by 7.5%.
Right, so you're just moving the
the
box
minimum,
over.
correct,
Right, just moving the max.
correct. So, Mr. Gandil, I'm gonna go ahead if there's something else.
I don't have any further comments.
Does that kind of answer your question on that?
Stacy, were there any specific job areas or positions that had already maxed out in the box?
Well, ever since we've had the boxes, not specific job areas, but specific employees in a box area. I think we had, if we leave it as is, I think we'll have 5 employees that would be maxed out, If we move it to the 7, or increase the 7.5%, I think it will look like there's 1 employee that's out of the box. And, that's kind of what it's designed for, is to stay within the job market value. Is that correct, Kevin? Those numbers correct?
There are currently 3, without any raises whatsoever, there are currently 3 that are already above their pay grade box. If I've just used as an example, at the 2% raise, without bumping pay scales up, that would increase that number to 5 individuals. If the pay scales are bumped to 7.5% that we're recommending, there would just be 1 individual that is above their box at that point.
Now, I understand moving the boxes doesn't cost any money, That's just moving the pay scale that we have in the district. And then you will base your pay raises on each area according to that, and that's where it affects the cost.
So can you make a recommendation?
Are we moving over B?
So what's the conversation?
This is discussion.
The discussion comes after a motion and a second, you have a discussion. At this point, there's nothing on the table to have a discussion about. Can we at least have a recommendation and get moving?
When we get to the action items, we will ask for a recommendation.
Where are we? We're still in budget workshop?
We're under discussion items, budget workshop.
We ain't got very far.
Any further things? We're still under discussion, and now it's item B, Don Sutherland scope of work and purpose of forensic audit.
On that one, Mr. Franklin had asked to have that on the agenda.
I guess, first and foremost, I guess my main question is, what is the purpose of this investigation, Mr. Wright? I mean, I know you've contacted this individual, he told us that he conducted fraud audits, so as of right now, myself, I believe Tony and Andrea have no idea why we are doing this. So could you please tell us what the purpose of this investigation is?
Is that directed to me? Okay. I will tell you all I can. Mr. Sutherland says that he has tried to explain it, that to go into detail somehow violates the integrity of the investigation itself. I think that if you've been listening, there have been a lot of questions about the sale of a building. And my understanding that Mr. Sutherland was going to look into that and interview personnel. And then, you know, $10,000 isn't going to go very far. And if there's anything else, there will have to be board action and discussion.
Why would it be your understanding that he's going to look into the building, considering we've not had a board conversation regarding what we're going to hire him to look into? At this point, we have not had any conversation to determine any scope of work for him whatsoever, regardless of a conversation that has been had causing a building, regarding water wells, regarding anything else that's come up. Why would you be under the impression that he's going to look into the building?
He was here the night that there was a discussion about that building.
That's not relevant. We haven't given him any direction.
Well, did he decide that that's what he wanted to look into, or did you direct him to look at that?
I did not direct him in any way. The only thing he told me is that he was working with our school attorney to write an engagement letter. Now, I'm not for sure why it's necessary that the two work together. Maybe Mr. Hardy can explain that. But we don't do that with an engagement letter from Ms. Jacks.
Well, I think we know that she's coming to audit our books. That's set up by TASB or by TEA. They tell us that we have to do that every year, so. But I guess, so have you been directing Mr. Sutherland to investigate the building?
I can represent to the board that I have no authority to do that. The board has not directed me to do anything related to Mr. Sutherland. We've had I imagine I've spent a grand total of 10 or 12 minutes on the telephone with him, and it's all been related to this evening's meeting and the scope of his work. I have not been presented with any documents from the board or from Mr. Sutherland as far as, I think, scope of work was mentioned, or a contract, or a proposal. I've not seen any of those documents. My firm has no relationship with Mr. Sutherland. In my conversations, I said, I'm not for you or against you. I'll work with you if the board hires you, to the extent that we're needed. I think the point is well made that we are not investigators. We're not ordinarily involved in that process. Help me understand if there's a further question, but the answer is no. I've not hired anyone. I don't have authority to do that.
Well, can Mr. Sutherland come forward and tell us who's told him what to investigate? I don't have my glasses on, I can't see where he's at. So.
I can tell you, is Mr. Sutherland here? I did speak with him this afternoon regarding this meeting. I was informed that he was confused about the time of the meeting or something to that effect. He did tell me that he intended to be here, but would be late. I've never met him, so I don't know if he's here.
So is he taking upon himself to decide what he's gonna investigate? Because he didn't tell him, you said you didn't tell him, the board didn't tell him, so he's just on his own.
I think that he is aware of the questions about the building and the problem that our citizen had with the Open Records Act.
Well, it's certainly not John Cosa's direction.
No,
Well,
but he's aware.
who's directing him? If he's already got,
aware
if he
of
already
the
has an idea of what he's coming to investigate, obviously somebody had to give him that direction. Was it through conversations with you?
He was here, Mr. Raymond.
I know he was here.
Well,
That does
he
not
can- he-
delegate what direction he's supposed to offer when he comes in and does his
And
investigation.
I don't believe that, well, I wish that Mr. Sutherland was here so he could speak to you. Has he spoken to you before?
Yes. Oh,
What
I
did he
called and
tell
talked to
you?
him. Let me tell you what he told me. He said that I'm working with your attorney, not the board president, because the attorney said that the board president was the boss and this is what she wanted investigated.
Well,
That's what he said.
He is also, I've been made aware of that allegation, I'll call it. I can tell you that, again, my firm has no contract with him, has not worked with him. I'm not trying to throw Mr. Sutherland under the bus, but we certainly have not retained him, have given him no direction, have never met him. If he's told somebody that he's working for us, I can tell you that that is not the case.
I didn't record it, but that's exactly what he told me. And that's what he told you, that he was working with our attorney.
to write an engagement letter.
Okay.
Now, again, I'm not for sure what that entails, but that's what he said.
Well, we should know. We're the ones supposed to tell him what it says. He's not the one to coming up with the ideas.
Again, I'll only offer that it is ordinary for us to review an engagement letter or a contract or a proposal so that we can advise the board about whether it's good or poor. I have not seen any of those documents. I certainly would not write another individual's engagement letter. He does business for the board if the board hires him, not for me. I might review that again so that I can advise the board, whether it's a good idea, a bad idea, or has favorable terms. My job is to look out for this board.
So let me see if I'm understanding this correctly. Mr. Sutherland came to a meeting to make a presentation on what his company does. And during this meeting, he sat and listened to a community member stand up and talk about the building. And then he made a decision he's going to come and investigate us?
No, I believe that there was a motion made to hire him. I don't think Mr. Sutherland decided that. The board decided it.
Well, again, I don't know what the board has decided to investigate. All I voted on was whether or not we're going to take $10,000 and switch it from a risk assessment with Greg Gibson and give it to Don Sutherland. But I have yet to see a scope of work that says what we're investigating from this board. I'm not talking about John Cosa. He is not a part of this board. He does not get to dictate whether or not we hire somebody or not.
That's correct, but in any investigation, I don't believe it is spelled out what's going to be investigated. If you expect the outcome to be considered one with integrity.
So are you saying now he's not gonna have an agenda when he's gonna investigate? He can investigate anything that he would like to investigate?
Well, again, I was hoping to see an engagement letter.
Would his engagement letter
I
then
think
tell
some of
us?
you have talked with both of these people more than I have.
I haven't spoken to either one of them on the subject. My next question was, you contacted Mr. Sutherland prior to this board meeting that we're talking about. When you contacted him, well, several things. Number one, how did you find him? How did you locate this individual? And for what purpose were you seeking a fraud audit report before Mr. Koser brought his alleged, allegations to the board?
Well, that's an easy question. As you well know, originally I wanted a risk assessment, that I thought that that would benefit our school, but some of you put every obstacle imaginable in the way of that risk assessment, and 5 months passed by. But in the interim of some of the things that were being said about Mr. Gibson, and someone found the newspaper article and made a big issue out of that. I was doing some research on Mr. Gibson, and it seems like Mr. Gibson and Mr. Sutherland sometimes do a lot of work together. So in looking up information from Mr. Gibson, I came across Mr. Sutherland. And both of them had done some work at some common school districts.
But that was for a risk assessment, it started out. So explain the other part.
I don't understand what other part you're talking about.
How it went from a risk assessment to a
Because,
forensic audit. Just because they had worked together before doesn't connect to me.
no, but I think the reaction to several of us sitting around this table has been extreme. And I can't help but wonder why you didn't want their risk assessment.
Again, we never said anything about that. I told you time and time again, I don't mind a risk assessment, period. We do them every year. Every year we do risk assessment. The issue was the process, and that's what we discussed.
We do not do a risk assessment to the extent that Mr. Gibson would do it. That's the disadvantage of a small school. We do not have staff that can do the assessment that he is capable of doing.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying no one objected to a risk assessment.
And there were no roadblocks put in place. I'm pretty sure the risk assessor is the person that decided not to come. None of us had anything to do with that.
That night at that meeting, he said very clearly, plain words, that he would not work for any board unless all the school board members were on board and the superintendent. The night that, when John made the recommendation, not the superintendent hiring, when a board member made the recommendation, and then we voted 4-3, that was as clear an indication as you can get, that not all people were on board. That was what he told us in that meeting, but we're actually getting off topic. But when he said that he would not work for us if we were not all in agreement, he told you right then that he wasn't coming to work for us. You might not have liked what he said, but that's what he told us. But back to this original deal. I guess at whatever point you suspected there was fraud, why didn't you just call the whole board in? Could have done an emergency meeting if you thought Stacy was involved, called our attorney in, we could have went into closed session and discussed it. You know, presented the facts to us as a board, and we may have all been on board with a fraud audit. You know, I don't know, why did we not handle it in that professional manner? Instead of you going out, seeking someone that did fraud audits, bring them to a meeting. While he's at the meeting, he hears allegations of fraud. Now he's picked a topic that he's going to come in and investigate. It sounds ridiculous.
Well, that's your opinion, Mr. Franklin, and you certainly can have it, but,
I guess, and then in the February meeting, I still have this document that was passed out to me, and it's about an email that was sent from Barbara Kenna to,
you are off topic.
no, this is straight on topic.
Well, you need to
Well,
make that
if you
clear.
think I'm stretching, you can scold me later, but here's the deal. She sent out an email. They had a discussion about it the next day. In that discussion, in this written document here, Barbara talks about, you know, people being thrown on the bus, that at some point some things will come out. I mean, Barbara knew about fraud and I didn't. How does that happen?
Took that email out of context.
No. This is what was given to me in writing. This is what Barbara said to her after the deal. We need to call them both in and see if that's not what one said or whatever. That's fine, but I mean, this isn't the first time that other people have talked about fraud, and here I am as a board member, and I don't even know what the fraud is.
I think you're stretching it and making
Well,
a
you can
connection
read
that
it.
doesn't exist.
No, there's been comments to other people that have said, there's stuff coming, you just wait, there's stuff coming. So if there's stuff coming, and then board members that have said it, there's stuff out there. So if board members are saying, there's stuff out there, there's fraud going on, you just need to wait and see what happens, I'm really curious what it is y'all are waiting on to tell the rest of the board of what's happening, or what's coming, or what's going on, because if we really have a problem, then all the board members will be behind doing an investigation. But when you don't tell anybody else what's going on, it makes it really hard for us to get behind it when you do it the way it's been done. And we get a 15-minute presentation and we hire a guy without any scope of work, without any direction, without any contract. It's just somebody knows there's something going on, but we're not going to tell anybody else until he does an investigation, just in case.
The part about those emails that I found to be most disturbing is the fact that we had 2 administrators involved in that. And
What emails?
the ones that Mr. Franklin was
Well,
referencing.
this is what I think she said about their conversation. This isn't in the email. This is a conversation.
I'm not talking about the email. I'm talking about board members who have made comments to people in the public of their stuff that's coming. And I mean, the only thing that the board people told me, all they're doing is wait for the elections, they bring it out before the election. And that's been said as well.
And you're bringing forth a lot of hearsay.
Exactly. But that's the conversation that we're talking about, is why are there people on the board talking about the fact that there's been fraud, there's been wrongdoing, there's things going on, but the other members of the board don't know what it is, and we have to put it on the agenda to have a conversation as opposed to being brought up in a closed session.
Perhaps you should consider the sources, because maybe it's all hearsay.
No, we hired the guy. It's not all hearsay. For some reason, we hired a guy. Somebody thinks they know something.
It's not what I was talking about.
I guess the next question I have is for the attorney. In a situation where we have fraud going on in our school, do we have to hire someone and pay them $10,000 to investigate it? Or are there other avenues to investigate that fraud where the school, I guess, number one, where we wouldn't have to pay the money, but number two, once the investigation's over and it looks like those allegations are true, it's someone that's investigated that actually has the authority to go forward with those allegations, or that part of that investigation to actually, I guess, if you will, convict someone.
I think I understand the question.
Yeah.
I'll do my best to answer it, and you please redirect me if I miss something. But generally speaking, I certainly am not aware that the first time I heard the word fraud related to anything at Sabine ISD was maybe last Friday. So this is news to me as well. I'm not a board member. I live in Tyler, but I'm not quite a community member here. So it's news to me. There are many ways to handle this. I can't tell you whether it absolutely does or does not involve hiring a particular individual. I certainly am not qualified to tell you how much it costs. I think there are other resources. It simply depends on what the allegations are and what the board believes may or may not have happened. The fact of the matter is that school districts tend to be very transparent. Any member of the public can see our checkbook. Anybody here can see our audit results. I've not reviewed either of those. I don't know what's in them. I'm told they're clean. I have no reason to believe that they're not. Is it legitimate for someone else to look at it? Absolutely. There's a reason the Texas law says that anybody here can go and look at those documents. They're probably on your website. There are not a lot of secrets in the school business.
Okay. Patty, at the last meeting, I made a question about if we were leaving from risk assessment to fraud. And you said, yes, you were leaning towards fraud. So can you tell me why you're leaning towards fraud?
I saw clear reason that there was a possibility of it, and that's all I will say.
What evidence gave you clear reason to think there was anything going on? You don't get to just say, well, I just think there's something going on. So you
Yes,
just
she
choose
does
not
get
to answer the
say that,
question.
Mr. Raymond.
Ma'am?
Yes, she does get to say that. If that's her answer to the question.
That's not an answer.
She can say it.
That's why we're having this conversation, is to get answers.
Then I guess my question is, if she can say that, then are you accusing me and Mr. Yandel of taking money? Is that coming out of your mouth?
I did not say that.
No, I'm asking.
I did
I'm asking your opinion.
I will not say another thing.
Okay, very well.
I'm gonna
The
try to
second
keep this
part of
going.
that is, you can look at it all you want to. Anybody else you hire can look at it all you want to, and we're good with that. We really are.
I guess my next question, Ms. Wright, is who has actually vetted this guy's credentials? And who did you call specifically for a reference? I mean, I assume you're the one that vetted him, unless some other school board member did.
Not this Mr. Hardy, his father told me that he had worked with both of them when there was such a problem with Mr. Gibson. And if you look at their work, both of them do some similar things, but in a slightly different manner, pardon me. I don't claim to know anything at all about auditing, so I don't know exactly how they're different. But Mr. Sutherland says he asked more questions than just looking at numerical data. Mr. Hardy said that he had worked with both of them and that they were both well-qualified people. And he said he had more experience with Mr. Gibson, had done more work with him, but he knew, he was aware of both of them.
So Mr. Hardy gave him a recommendation.
Well, I don't know that you call that a recommendation, but we were talking about two people, and he had positive things to say about both of them. He didn't choose one man over the other. Well, in a way he did, I guess. He said that Mr. Gibson was very thorough. I would be inferring but to me that sounds like he was saying that that was something Mr. Gibson could do, that possibly Mr. Sutherland wasn't that thorough. But we had such a problem with getting the risk assessment going. Nothing, if the risk assessment had gone as it was supposed to have in January, we would be setting goals based on the outcome of that risk assessment, and our school district would be moving forward. And that did not happen. And
Based on the way that he was hired is the reason that didn't happen. It had nothing to do with the board meeting. It was the fact that it was not brought in prior to, and then had the ability to get a proposal, to get a contract, to have a scope of work, to have everything
Some
done.
people don't get their way.
It has nothing to do with get their way. It's the way it's supposed to be done. It's not my way. It's school way. It's not Tony's way.
So are you saying that Mr. Gibson would have come, had been allowed to come, or in your words, not mine, but that right now Stacy and Kevin wouldn't be under investigation?
I can't say that.
Oh.
Sometimes Mr. Gibson finds things.
I wasn't following how
I don't
Gibson
know.
fell into this.
I would say that my interest in bringing Mr. Gibson in the beginning was based on safe and secure buildings. I have said this numerous times. We have two campuses that aren't as secure as our new elementary is. And we're all concerned about the safety of our children. And also looking at just our
I'm
normal.
not following how this has to do with Mr. Sutherland's credentials. I'm not. How are we tying this back to?
You asked me.
Mr. Gibson's not coming, Ms. Wright.
I understand that, Mr. Frank.
Well, let's just talk
And
about
a lot-
Mr. Sutherland.
That isn't what you asked me.
Yeah, I asked okay, I'll go back and read my question. I wrote it down. Who vetted his credentials and who did you call for references?
Mr. Hardy.
Did you call anybody else he'd actually worked for?
That he has worked for?
Yeah, the guy that we're hiring, Mr. Sutherland.
No.
No.
Excuse me, we're not taking questions from the audience.
I guess my next question is, have we seen a rate sheet from Mr. Sutherland? Has he provided us with any kind of rate sheet at all? It's called a rate sheet. Typically, I do consulting work, so typically I provide people either work on lump sum or work time and materials. And then on time and materials, I provide them with a rate sheet that shows all the things that I charge for, such as my billing rates for different individuals. I also provide him with rates for mileage, like you said, he's driving over tonight to come talk to us. Mileage rates, if he stays in a motel, you know, a lot of times those are marked up, you know, you have a 10 or 20% markup, whatever the rates may be. I'm just wondering if we have some rate sheets. My biggest concern is that if we do not start tracking cost right now on this project, it's gonna get away from us. And so, and that's where I'm going. I'd like to see some rate sheets and some cost tracking. I mean, like tonight, there's gonna be a charge for him coming over. All the conversations that you or anybody else has had with him, you charge for that. The conversations that y'all had with the attorney on this topic needs to be tracked as part of this project. So I'd like to kind of know where we're at so far, how much we've already been billed.
Well, you know that it's not going to get out of hand. There is a limit of $10,000, as I recall that motion.
But if we've already spent $1,500 to have the conversations of what we're gonna do,
Well, we haven't done that we
how do you know
of.
that we know of?
Well,
He could be charging us $500 just to drive out here tonight, we wouldn't know any
He
better.
could, but he made it clear he wasn't charging.
Made it clear to who?
Excuse me, Mr. Raymond, would you quit interrupting? When he came for the presentation, he said there was no charge involved.
In charge involved for what?
The presentation he made.
I'm talking about him coming tonight.
Well, if he gets here, I assume if he doesn't come, there won't be a charge for not coming. And if he does come, you can ask him that
I
question.
will.
But when he made his presentation, there was a question asked about his rates, and he gave two numbers. And
So we're paying $300 an hour for him to drive here from wherever he lives?
no, Mr.
Well, how do you not, why not? Because that's the only rate you
don't know that
have.
we are, and
I don't know, but
that
I
we
sure would
are.
like to know. That's the reason we're having this conversation.
Imaginary questions.
No, I'm not. The only number you have is 300. You said 300 an hour, so are we paying 300 an hour for him to drive here?
You may ask him if he arrives. If he doesn't arrive, the question.
So if he gets there 5 minutes before the meeting's over, do we still pay for his trip?
I guess, Ms. Wright, and this is the reason for my questions. I mean, for me, I would charge you travel time as a consultant. My travel time to and from here. Any conversations that he's had with you or any other board members that have called him, you know, I would charge for those things. A lot of times, and that's the reason we need to see his rate sheets, you know. A lot of times you have minimum charges, like with attorneys, you call them one time, they've got, and I don't know if y'all do a 30-minute charge, minimum charge, or?
We bill in 1/10 increments of six,
One-
6 minutes.
Okay, so they're breaking it down even farther. So those are the things you have to find out. We've certainly incurred some cost already just from, well, you said you've only talked to him, or your office only talked to him for about 10 minutes, so.
That's probably correct, and I've had one or two conversations with Mr. Bryce when he asked me to be here tonight, and asked, you know, I think everybody expected Mr. Sutherland to appear tonight to answer some of these
Right.
questions.
And then have you had any conversations with any board members about this topic?
I have not had a conversation.
Or
with
your
any board-
office, I guess?
I have not had a conversation with any board member about any topic, and I think since the last time I was here for your training, I can't represent what my partners have done, although I can represent that the other one who shares my name has been out of town since last Thursday, and I doubt that he's taken any calls.
Right. I guess those are all things that are going to attribute themselves to the cost of this endeavor. So I would just hope that we would track all those costs, at least on a weekly basis, because as a consultant, I can tell you $10,000 just kind of gets you started on a project, especially something this magnitude, so.
I think I commented that
Right.
10,000 isn't going to go very far.
Absolutely. I guess, and that.
And I think your point is well taken. But some of these things that have been brought up, it's impossible to answer.
Certainly. And that leads me to my next question. If he comes back in 2 weeks and says, hey, we've run past, you know, with my time and the attorney's time, we've exceeded, we're at the maximum $10,000 budget, but I haven't finished my investigation, do you foresee bringing it back to the board and having another vote to extend that dollar amount, or will you just stop the investigation at that point if he hasn't come to conclusion within the amount of money that's been allotted?
Well, I think you would realize that it depends on whatever that report would be to the board. But,
Well, I guess what I'm saying is he
if his
comes,
report is all positive,
well, no, I'm saying, what if he says, well, I haven't been able to complete my investigation. I haven't been able to complete the work that you asked me to do. And I need more
we
time, more
would
money.
definitely,
Yes, that's it.
So you would,
we would certainly come back to the board. We've
And-
only approved $10,000, whether it's finished or not.
right, so do you foresee if he's not able to do it for $10,000 and he's not
There would be
finished?
a board meeting before any further work was done.
Okay. And then I guess last question I had, will Mr. Sutherland report to the entire board when his report's complete? Or will he call and speak with you independently prior to conversations with us?
I believe Mr. Sutherland is in the audience now. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
At the board's pleasure, I would love to give you this microphone.
To respond to one of your comments, I'll ask you, your response was, it's impossible to answer at this time. If we'd have had the documents prior to us hiring him, it would not be impossible. Those are the answers you're supposed to get before you hire a consultant.
Good afternoon. Sorry I'm running late today. Happy to answer any questions y'all want to ask.
Mr. Raymond wants to know if you have charged to drive down here, whether we
No.
have been paying you $300 an hour to drive here.
We were asking about having a rate sheet to know what do you charge for travel time, what do you charge for consulting time with the telephone, just something to have us, to give us an idea.
I usually don't charge any time for cell phone calls, unless it's during my regular work, when I'm on site doing the work. My drive time, I usually charge half rate. For school districts, I've cut that out pretty much. And so, I'm not charging any time for drive time.
Do you have this published on a rate sheet?
I'm sorry?
Is that published on some sort of rate sheet?
No, sir.
So do you have a rate sheet you can provide us with?
No, I have a contract I provided you with the attorneys that showed you my schedule of fees.
Mr. Sutherland, can I ask you, do you know why you've been hired to work for our school?
I've been asked to look at one issue in particular and discuss with others to interview people to determine if there's other issues and to look at those issues within the scope of a $10,000 fee.
Who directed you? Who did you have that conversation with?
I have had a conversation with Ms. Wright and the board's attorneys.
Did the school board attorney ever direct you to look at that one topic or to interview people and look at other topics? I guess if they come up?
No.
Then
How did you pick the topic that you're going to be interviewing for?
you just said Ms. Wright gave you that.
I'm sorry.
How was the topic picked that you're actually going to be interviewing for?
And I still didn't hear the question.
Well, I mean, you can't just, is
How
it
did
just
you pick
secret?
the topic?
The rest of the board members can't know why you're investigating our school?
Oh, no, well, here's what my discussion has been with the board attorneys and the board members I've spoken to, which has basically been Ms. Wright and Mr. Raymond, is that these types of investigations, you really don't want to go in and discuss the issues that a person might have allegations regarding, even with other board members. If a board member has a complaint they want to bring forward, then it can be brought into the investigation and determine whether it can be investigated within the $10,000 fee, or at the end of the $10,000 fee. I'll write a report to tell you what was investigated and what other allegations were discussed. But these types of investigations, I don't think you really want to sit here and say, well, you have problems here, you have problems there. We don't know if you have problems. We have issues that people have brought forward that the board has asked us to look at.
Okay, so
And I
my,
know that's not a complete board, but it is, it has been discussed to the point that y'all want a forensic investigation, accounting investigation, and the board voted on that, as I understand it.
Okay, for her and ISD, you had told us that the reason you came in to investigate fraudulent activities because the superintendent asked you to come. That was general. I read another thing, I think it was more ISD, that I read a report you did, and it said on it that the reason you came was because of an employee was reporting something that they thought was not working well in the accounting department. So can you give us something kind of general like that besides just somebody has given you something that needs to be reported, needs to be investigated?
I have not been asked to come here by your superintendent, nor have I spoken to any of your employees, as I understand.
So did you just come because Martha Wright asked you to come?
Martha Wright, when you say come, did I come today just because she asked me to
No,
come?
I know
or-
Ms. Wright asked you to come and make a presentation. That's the first time we've ever seen you, was the night you came and did a presentation. At that time, to me, you acted like you really didn't even know why you were there. And now, we've all of a sudden gone from some risk assessment with Greg Gibson, which you said you do not do risk assessments, to now we're doing a fraud audit. And I'm just curious if what red flag has come up that's made a switch from being a risk assessment to a fraud audit.
Well, that's a decision by the board, that's not my decision. But yes, I was asked to come give a presentation by Ms. Wright.
And then we hired you. Do you even know why you've been hired?
Again, to do a fraud investigation, or fraud audit, as it's now routinely called.
So,
Yes, ma'am.
Are you going, are you going to be interviewing any board member that wants to talk to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so everyone here can, is this a private interview, or do you do it as a board, or how is that done?
I would do individual private interviews.
So every board member here can ask whatever they want to ask, or tell you what they want to tell you?
Yes, ma'am.
okay, so my next question, follow up from that. So Ms. Wright decides she wants you to look at the building. I think you need to look at the junior high principal. Paul thinks you need to look at the business manager. Rusty thinks you need to look at the high school principal. So you're just going to invest everything we tell you to?
Those weren't my words.
Not your
Okay.
words, but that's my question. If every board member up here, if 7 different board members give you 7 different directions, you're going to run that 7 different directions?
My answer was earlier, I will put it in my report as to which issues I deem the most important to look at, which I looked at, and which issues I did not have a chance to look at within the $10,000 fee structure.
So how do you prioritize which board member you follow and which one you don't?
Probably through criminality.
Through what?
Well, typical criminality, depending on what he finds. So my next question is then, as a board, which you say you've worked with school districts in the past, no board member is a board unless we're in a meeting with a quorum and a majority makes a decision on something that's on the agenda as a topic item. So if I or Paul or Martha or anybody else directs you, that's still not board direction. That's just Tony said.
The board has already directed him to do what he can.
No, the board
with
has hired him.
$10,000 budgeted for
I want him to look into the elementary school.
Then tell him that.
I don't have any authority to tell him that.
Yes, you do.
I think we're talking about a procedural problem where if the board, or if someone wants you to look at allegations of this building, the board would need to vote to have you look at that item. Because for you to get directive from this board, we have to have discussed it and voted on it. Because as individual board members, we have absolutely no authority to direct any contractor for the school district. The only person that's been given that authority to direct a contractor is our superintendent. And And am I wrong about that, Mr. Hardy?
I don't believe you said anything incorrect yet.
Okay. So I guess this whole idea of Ms. Wright saying, if there's something I want you to investigate, I can give you a directive to do that, and then you can decide if you're gonna do it or not, based on whatever procedures you use. I don't believe I have that authority.
And I don't think you do either. All I'm saying is you're not giving me a directive, you're giving me a concern, and that's the word I
Okay.
use, is that board members can bring concerns that they have regarding fraud to me.
Right.
And then it will be put in my report as to as to all the allegations that were brought forward to me by individual board members or by employees or whomever I speak to, citizens of the community, and determine which ones are the most imminent or most prominent to investigate within the $10,000 budget, and then list them what was investigated and what concerns were brought to me during that investigation, for the board to later reconsider on whether they want to do more work, whether it be with me or another fraud investigator.
I have to ask this question. Am I being investigated? I mean, has my name been given to you to be investigated?
I'm sorry, what's your name?
And then if for some reason you decide that there is some board member decides to do that and that makes it up your list, at that point, should I not talk to you and seek legal counsel? If I'm being investigated in fraud, or anyone else in our school, should they seek legal counsel before talking to you?
I will definitely tell you whether you're being investigated before I ask you a question.
Okay.
I don't hide things in
Well,
that manner.
that's a
But
legitimate
to answer your question, whether I know your name or not, there have not been any allegations against any
Okay.
board members to my knowledge.
Well, as far as our staff goes, if they're being investigated, you would need to let them know up front, I guess. Should they need an attorney present? I guess back to your days when you were on the FBI.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I would assume if you're gonna talk to someone, interview someone, you would have had to have read them their rights, Miranda rights. So they would know that, hey, I need to have an attorney present before I start to speak with you. So if this is a fraud audit, and this could lead to some kind of criminal activity, should some of these individuals be investigated, go ahead and seek legal counsel individually?
Well, let me clear that up real quick. As an FBI agent, we do not read people their rights.
Well, I don't know that.
Unless we detain them, handcuff them, arrested them, or whatever, just to go interview someone, even though we believe them to be guilty, we were not required under the Miranda rights to read them those rights. So no, we didn't do that.
And I'm sorry for ignorance, and this is all new to me, I promise you.
Sure.
This is.
But in my business, if I were to sit down with someone working for the school, I would probably tell them right up front, we've had allegations of this against you, and we'd like to discuss it with you. I do not make a recommendation or comment as to whether they need an attorney or don't need an attorney. Again, my FBI upbringing, we did not do that. We're not lawyers. Even if we were lawyers in the FBI, we did not advise people whether they needed counsel or not. That's their own decision. But we did tell them whether they were under investigation or not, and that's what we would do here with school employees. I don't know if it's someone outside the school that's doing something improper, whether I would tell them that we were investigating them. We might try to find out what they knew first before telling them anything.
Could the two of you tell us where we now stand as far as getting the proper documents or signed between the two of you so that you can begin your work?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Hardy Sr., I sent him an engagement letter last week. I think he's been out of the office and we've missed each other on, and I was supposed to send it to Mr. Hardy Jr. here, and I never got around to sending it to him. But I have an engagement letter submitted to them. And then I do have a list of documents that I would like to get before I come on site to start doing the investigation to save time.
Just to elaborate on that a little bit, Mr. Sutherland has indicated to us that he has sent documents to our office. I just checked by email. Unfortunately, they were not received. I never received them. John Senior doesn't have them. We'll be glad to look at them at such time as we have them. Mr. Sutherland is making an accurate representation to the board. He and I discussed this afternoon, not in any detail, but he did tell me that there were some documents that he desired to see, before he got started. I guess that would perhaps direct or shed light on what he would be looking at. I don't have any further information on that yet. We were both in our vehicles when we spoke, and he indicated he was bringing that material tonight.
So if the approval is given for the two of you to work together, then the board is no longer involved in the paperwork aspect of it?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. We're happy to work with Mr. Sutherland if that's the board's pleasure. Mr. Sutherland does not work for us. We're not qualified to direct him or tell him what to do because I've got less of an idea than you do what's going on.
Oh, no, you don't. Because I have to find out things by reading the paper generally.
I don't even read the paper here.
We need to know, since apparently there have been many comments made that everything's not in order for Mr. Sutherland to begin work. What is not in order and how do we put these things in order if the board chooses to continue this process that we've approved?
Take that or me? I think you should. I mean, realistically, all I need is a signed engagement letter. I did represent to you, and I believe the board, when I gave the presentation, that it's best to hire me through the district's attorney for attorney-client privilege, in case you should need that. You're not always going to be able to keep that through, at the end of the investigation, but through the investigation, you can keep the attorney-client privilege. But you don't have to do that, but that's the best way to do it.
I will agree with at least some portion of that. Mr. Sutherland, I assume not an attorney, would not have the attorney-client privilege with the board as far as his communication. So I do understand that. I understand that it is a strategy that sometimes clients request their attorneys. Typically, let me give you an example. In a litigation setting, your attorney can hire expert witnesses. They can be what we call consulting experts. You don't have any control over them. I hire them, they go and they consult to me, and the information they produce to me, unless I ever choose to use it in a courtroom, is not public. It is protected by my privilege with the board. I can tell you that, we have done that in a litigation context. In this sort of a context, ordinarily, our firm does not carry those contracts with investigators. Ordinarily, that's hired, that's a board decision, and Mr. Sutherland reports to the board. We can have a separate discussion of how the board prefers to handle that. I didn't really come prepared to speak on that, other than to tell you, kind of the norm. It is a good practice in certain circumstances. The downside, if you will, is the board risks lots of community chatter about being transparent, because as soon as I and the board say that's protected by privilege and nobody here gets to see it, that is true, and that is legal, and that is unpopular. That's my best summary of that.
So let me see if I'm understanding correctly. So you're saying it would be best if instead of him working just with your law firm, he worked with the board? Is that would be better for transparency and all those purposes?
I'm going to be a lawyer on you for a minute. I'm going to say that depends on what best means.
I'm just so confused on this whole ordeal. I don't
Now,
know.
are you seeking transparency or are you seeking confidential? Because if he works with the attorney, it's all confidential. If he works with us, it's all transparent.
And again, that is true, but I want to offer the same clarification that Mr. Sutherland made, which is, at the end of this, assuming he makes some kind of a report, it will be to the board, and that, at least the extent of that, is highly likely to be public information. Now, anything that's not in that, anything he doesn't get to, or anything he thinks, he doesn't make any finding, there's nothing wrong, or that he simply doesn't get that far down the list, of course, that's not going to be in a report, you know that.
At the end of this, whenever that may be, do you foresee you reporting all the information directly to the board as a whole? Or do you see yourself reporting information independently to our board president during the process and not including us on those conversations?
We have always reported to the board. I don't do independent reports that board members,
Okay.
especially on fractured boards, even unfractured boards, we have never made independent reports to board members. It has always been to the entire board in closed session.
Okay. Have you ever conducted an investigation where you found no fraud?
Where I found nothing wrong?
Yeah, found nothing wrong.
Surely.
Okay. I'm sorry for stupid questions, okay? Because
No.
first of all,
I've been
I'll
hired by
try
cities that thought they were missing $6 million and they had just spent it. They weren't missing it.
If I may, let me volunteer this to go back just a little bit on a point as far as direction. It is normal for someone standing in Mr. Sutherland's shoes to have some autonomy. He needs that to be able to investigate. I understand that. I think the board understands that. I also understand the argument that if we all stand here tonight and tell him exactly what he's investigating, that makes the investigation much harder, or that tips off people that he might be looking at, to put it in layman's terms. I get that. A middle ground or a compromise that I see frequently is what I might call a blanket directive, which is the board hires Mr. Sutherland or anyone it pleases to perform these types of services and to take his direction from individual board members. He already indicated that he'd be willing to meet with anyone individually, hear their concerns, and what you have to trust in that scenario is his prioritization of what he's going to get to. I think Ms. Wright has made the point well that $10,000 is a limiting budget. So I'm not going to have control, and perhaps no single one of you is going to have control over that prioritization. He may wish to speak to that. He used a term that I understood earlier about the criminality of something would prioritize it. He may want to share a little bit more about how those concerns would take priority, and that's his realm. I don't pretend to know everything he knows or even close. But that's kind of a compromise ground where you're hiring him to perform these services. I've seen many cases where someone like Mr. Sutherland is hired to look at one thing, and they get to their third interview, and they're seeing nothing but, boy, Joe Smith that he interviews, I hope there's no Joe Smith here, tips him off about something that turns out actually to be a problem that nobody on the board was even aware of. It would be natural for somebody like Mr. Sutherland to go down that rabbit hole. Again, there has to be, and I understand there's some contentiousness over this, that's obvious, but there has to be at least a base level of trust if you're going to hire Mr. Sutherland or anybody else, that there's got to be a little bit of autonomy in what he's going to be doing. The board also collectively has to be comfortable at least with what the scope of that is. What I'm hearing as far as scope is, well, the scope is $10,000, and that is something. Professionals can only work so long. The only thing Mr. Sutherland has to sell is his time. He's just like me, and he can only get so much done in that amount of time. What he's going to do, I don't know myself.
Thank you for answering my questions.
You done?
Well, I was going to say, thank you for answering my questions, and just so you know, from my point, this has all happened really fast. I had absolutely no idea that we even needed a fraud audit So I'm coming at it from that position, so.
Would you recommend that there be a three-person committee being the oversight?
I think that was a recommendation.
Ma'am? I asked, did either of them recommend that instead of a single board member or even a couple of board members, there be a three-person committee that directs and has the conversations with Sutherland during the term of the investigation?
He said he's gonna talk to everybody.
I would not.
You don't recommend that?
I don't recommend that, no, sir.
My reservation, I'm indifferent about that. My reservation is purely that you do have a limited budget, and every hour that Mr. Sutherland or I or anybody has to spend reporting to a subcommittee is eating into your budget. And I want to be, let's focus on what our outcome here is and what we're actually trying to accomplish, and be careful with our budget. My preference, frankly, is that he's like me. I've got 7 bosses, and sometimes it's hard to keep all 7 happy. If it gets that way, I report to whichever 4 tell me what to do. But it's my preference that anyone doing business with the district reports to the board.
And just let me clarify, if I am hired through, and that's why another reason to be hired through your attorney, is I will keep him almost daily abreast of our investigative results. And if he or me or the 2 of us decide that the board should know something immediately, we will do what you normally do to meet to make everyone aware of the issue.
How do you separate the two? Because you work for this board. How can you not keep us informed? How can you keep anything from this board? How do you have that right as our school attorney to keep things from us until you feel like it's the right time?
And that, I think you've hit an important issue. And to answer very bluntly, I largely don't have that right. Because
Okay.
you are correct. I work for this board, and if a majority of the board calls me, or if I'm standing at this meeting and the board president asks me a question, did Don Sutherland tell you such and such? I work for you, and I'm going to answer that question.
Okay.
And he knows that. At that point, that would be self-defeating, because then, the privilege that you gain through that added layer is gone.
Sure.
But I will tell you this, what he's asking for, again, is not unusual.
Right.
At any point, if Mr. Sutherland reported something to me that I thought was criminal or egregious or, a danger to the district or its children, I believe I have an affirmative duty to make the board aware of it. That probably, outside of a board meeting, that probably involves calling the president and asking if she needs to schedule a meeting, and calling the superintendent, unless, in my opinion, the unlikely event that it relates to him. Those are the district's leadership until such time as there's a meeting. It's my job to make you aware of that. I will never stand here and refuse to answer a question from my client and my bosses.
Right. Well, I think in the past, your father has recommended that we've had meetings, and our board president has chose not to have those meetings. So if you called our board president and said, this is up, and I think we need to have a meeting about it, and then she so chooses not to call that meeting, we have to have some recourse to that. I mean, it can't be that she now knows something's up and decides not to have a meeting.
I would have to review this board's policy on meetings. Ordinarily, you're correct, the board president is the proper person to call a meeting. Ordinarily, there's a policy about how that takes place, upon the request of a certain number of members. I'd have to look at your policy about whether
It's
a-
2.
I'm sorry.
2 members to call a special meeting, and then one suggested an emergency meeting, and I replied that I didn't see that this met the criteria, but I was more than willing to ask your opinion or your father's opinion, but I wasn't requested to do so.
Well, and let me make that fair point, that emergency has a meaning to all of us, but emergency as far as school board meetings is very strictly defined under the law. I won't make too much of a generalization, but it almost rises to the level of, unless the high school's burning down, we don't have an emergency. We have 3 days to call a meeting. So, emergency is a legal term of art. It doesn't mean, how we might use it in our daily lives necessarily.
Well, the situation I was talking about was a pending litigation situation. But I guess for two board members to be able to call a meeting, two board members would have to know that you had received some concerns from Mr. Sutherland, not just one. So I guess if the board president and maybe the vice president were both informed, that would be a safer route for us.
Certainly, and I'll also tell you, there's no reason that my office isn't going to take a call from any one of you.
Certainly.
Certainly, you've elected your directors, your president, your vice president, and so forth. But if any one of you calls my office and asks me a question, you're going to get an answer. And again, that's not to compete Mr. Sutherland's work, but ultimately, independent of the chain, we work for you. Now, we do that based on a relationship that we trust one another, and we have confidentiality and a privilege. If I'm not throwing rocks at anybody, believe me, but if a board member chooses to call me and run whatever answer I give them to whatever question in tomorrow's paper, I'm powerless to stop that. And they've waived our privilege, and so be it. I can't control it.
There's going to be an action item later on in the meeting, and I hope the two of you will be here to help us with the wording of that.
I'm here at the board's pleasure.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay. Ms. Wright stated that the reason she wanted to go with a risk assessment was for security purposes.
That was one reason.
Do you do security? Is that any part of your safety issues on campuses? Do you do any of that in your investigative process?
As far as, that's a very broad question in my mind. And when you say safety, in the past, when we've talked to, we've conducted municipality or especially school investigations, we have received complaints regarding the safety of children. We usually don't do those investigations, but one of them we did to an extent to get it to law enforcement. If you're talking about just physical security of looking to see that cameras are set up and things of that nature, no ma'am, I don't do that.
Any questions?
I'm just curious, between now and when this is an action item, are they supposed to get together and go over documents to?
I don't know. You need to address your question to them. I haven't seen the documents.
I haven't either, that's why I'm asking. So between now and when this becomes an action item, are y'all getting together to go over documents? So that, as our attorney, you've looked at the documents and can advise us one way or another?
No, let me restate again that unfortunately, perhaps due to technical snafus, I do not have any documents. I don't know what Mr. Sutherland has available today.
Oh, do you have the documents with you?
I don't have a hard copy, I can get it printed out, or I can.
Okay.
Our action item says approval of any actions / documents necessary for Don Sutherland to begin his audit. Is that sufficient?
I think that the item is sufficient for action. The issue is that neither the board nor the attorney has seen the documents. So I'm not telling you you can't take action. I just have no idea what you actually would be taking action on, short of some time to review that. Whether that can be done in 30 minutes, I can't say.
Can we get somebody to get a printer fired up?
He just said he could read it off his phone.
I think even if I'm able to review it on a screen or something of that nature, the board is going to have a document to sign and execute if we're going to take action. That's not to say that the board can't take a broader action.
I thought we just had to give our approval for you to act on our behalf.
I will have to consult consult with my partners and make sure that, now you've involved my firm reviewing an agreement, which we haven't seen yet. So I simply just, I'm not trying to play games, I just can't represent whether I'm gonna agree to or sign something I haven't seen.
But if we take this action and you get the documents and you approve of them, are you in a position to then execute the documents so that the work can begin?
I could be in a position to give you an answer on that by the end of this meeting. But again, if your intent, I don't know what action you're talking about, there's no motion on the floor, but if the action you're speaking of is directing my firm to hire Mr. Sutherland, that is a firm decision. I should be able to get a response on that, but just as any single board member can't speak for the board, I need to consult with my firm to make sure I can speak for the firm as to that arrangement. And again, depending on the terms of that, which I've not seen, any more than you have seen. If you intended to do this directly, you haven't seen the documents, and probably be hesitant to say you'll sign them before reading.
Yeah, so are you wanting to vote on something that you haven't even read? Is that your intent tonight?
Since Mr. Sutherland said that he works through our attorney, and we have a trust with that relationship, and we've already hired Mr. Sutherland to do this job, it seemed like to me that yes, we were going to grant permission for Mr. Hardy's firm to act on our behalf.
And actually, let me just address that. It's an interesting point. I was not at the prior meeting. I've not reviewed the minutes. I wasn't here for the motion. It's an interesting point that the board has already hired Mr. Sutherland, because then directing me to hire Mr. Sutherland is something of an oddity.
I didn't think that
Hey, let's have a little order of respect for the board. That's not intended to be funny. That's us trying to figure out how we're supposed to work for these folks.
it was not my understanding that we were giving you permission to hire Mr. Sutherland. We already had hired Mr. Sutherland. That you were signing an engagement letter is all, whatever that would entail. And again, all of this came about because of comments that some of these board members made in the newspaper, that we don't have everything in place. Well, what do we need in place so that Mr. Sutherland can work?
If the board has in fact hired Mr. Sutherland in a prior meeting, it's my opinion then that he is the board's employee or contractor in this case, and the board should have an engagement letter with it. If the board desires to backtrack on that, it's a little bit of a separate conversation as far as the arrangement between my firm and Mr. Sutherland. That's a discussion I've not been involved with before tonight. It would not make sense if the board has hired Mr. Sutherland for me to sign an engagement letter where I've not hired him. That's, I guess, the only point I'm trying to make.
If you're willing as board president to change direction of this board and what we're doing, based on some comments that even I had made to the newspaper, then I will say to the newspaper right now, we don't need Mr. Sutherland. If we think there's fraud going on in our school, we can seek law enforcement to investigate that fraud, and we won't even have to spend the $10,000. We won't need a limited budget. We already pay taxes, and they can investigate it for free. We can make those claims to the district attorney first thing in the morning.
Mr. Sutherland, what do you want to say? Anything that can clarify the situation?
Well, I mean, that's why I'm in this business. Law enforcement receives thousands of complaints. They do not get to investigate every one. With my background, I routinely do an investigation. If there's something that needs to go to law enforcement, it helps to work that process through at a quicker pace, and they actually come to some success on it. Instead of having it hang out there that, oh, we reported it, and when's it gonna get done?
I think our district attorney could probably move this up to the forefront. We can all go and visit with him in the morning and ask him to do that. And at that point, he decides that he can investigate it anytime soon, then we can come back and hire Mr. Sutherland. But we certainly don't need to vote and rush to a vote tonight to approve a document we hadn't even seen.
You have the document with you, but it's on your phone, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So can we print that document out?
If I can email it to someone that's hooked to a printer here, yes.
Email it to all of us.
I can email it to all of you.
We all have a Gmail. I have a student email account, if you want to email it to me, print it out, whatever.
School.
I mean, school email.
While that's going on, can we take a recess, bathroom break? With the number of people in here, probably need to go to the restroom, probably, what do you think, probably 20 minutes would be a better suggestion.
We will recess this open meeting for 15 minutes. We're calling this meeting back to order at 6:23. We're moving on to the first action item, the approval of proposed pay scales.
Okay, these are the pay scales that we were discussing earlier, and basically what we're looking at here is increasing those boxes by 7.5% across the board. That's just the boxes, nothing to do with salary whatsoever. Again, it's for upkeep of the pay scale, or update of the pay scale as recommended by TASB when they put this in. So basically, you've had a chance to look at that, but it's just simply 7.5% increase across the board. Doesn't affect any salaries at this point, will not until you vote on salaries. So my recommendation would be to approve the proposed pay scales as presented.
When you say it doesn't affect salaries, a new person being hired wouldn't have the benefit of that minimum box being increased?
It just depends. If they were coming in at the very minimum, yes, it would,
Okay, so it
put
does
that
affect.
minimum. Many times when people come in, they don't start at that very minimum, though, depending on their experience. So it could affect a brand new person, it's their first job and that kind of thing.
Correct, so it does have some effect. Okay, any other comments? Is there a motion to approve the pay scales?
Make a motion.
Mr. Raymond moved, we need a second. Mr. Franklin? All in favor by a show of hands? The vote was unanimous. And the next item is approval of pay raises for 2016, 2017.
Okay, you also have that in front of you, and looking at that, there are three different categories: the administrative and professional, clerical, technical, and auxiliary. And in front of you, you have, I guess let's start on the left-hand column on this. It would be a little easier. We have not discussed, and I think it needs to be discussed, looking at the pay step for the teachers increases automatically each year as their year experience. And what we put there was the cost that we would inquire next year in our budget for the required pay step increase. That's $67,000. And then if the board decided to go $500 above that, in other words, add $500 to it, then the cost would be $52,916 additional dollars. And last year, we looked at both of those. We looked at just the step increase. We looked at 500, we looked at 1,000. If you remember, the board passed 750 plus the step. So the required step is a given. It will happen unless the board just says, no, we're not even going to do that, but that's very unusual. But the combination of those two, you can see the cost, the required step, $67,267. If we added another 500 to the steps, it would cost the district around $52,900. That would be a total of $120,183, for the teaching staff. If you looked at $1,000, then it would just simply double that $52,900. So that's something, for discussion. I'm sorry.
The 67 is already built into the $104,000 that's down there in the bottom.
Good point.
So additional expense, if the board chooses, would only be $52,000.
And again, if you remember what Mr. Yangle was saying earlier in the workshop about the 104,660 down there, if the board, selects to use that designated fund balance for repairs, if you use that, then that deficit turns into 155,340 to the good, like he explained earlier, and that's where you would start off in looking at salaries at that point. So in that decision, this board, not particularly this board, but the Sabine ISD board has set that money aside previously for construction purposes like we were talking about. It's been there for quite a while. It's just designated outside the regular fund balance. Discussion regarding teacher pay scales, pay raises. Okay, I'll go ahead and make a motion to do a step increase. Yeah, make a recommendation for a $500 step increase to the teacher salary scale, and also, of course, the required step.
You're recommending we go ahead and bump it to 500?
Yes, we talked about that last year. We talked about doing 1,000 last year, and really,
750 last year.
right, thought we may not could afford that, and
As long as we move that 260, we're good. As long as we move the 260.
well, yeah, either way, it's all in the same pot of money,
Okay.
But yes, for budget purposes and operating expenses, that's correct.
Okay. I'll make a motion.
Discussion? How are our teacher salaries lining up with neighboring schools?
We're not at the top.
No, but we're not at the bottom either.
Not at the bottom either. We go farther in steps than any other district around here, which is good. Again, it's like you look at different pay scales in different districts, and many of them loaded on the front end, try to attract the employees, the teachers to come there. And once they're there, about 5 years, they've got their hooks in them, and they don't feel like they'll leave. So So there are districts that are ahead of us there. As the scale moves, as the years go by with teachers staying there, our scale catches up to most of them, I would say. There's gonna be exceptions because it's gonna be very difficult to compete with tax bases such as Longview ISD and Tyler ISD, those districts. But I think otherwise, we're competing pretty well with districts around us.
Okay, I'm going to state that I want our teachers to have everything that we can afford for them. I wanted the $1,000 plus their step last year, but we compromised on $750. But, those of us that have grown accustomed to getting a check from the school, we haven't worried about what's happening to our local economy so much. And I think about those that they're certainly not expecting a raise this year when you get out away from the school employment. And a lot of them didn't even manage to hang on to a job. And you made the statement that it would be hard not to approve the regular step. So once we raise that extra 500, then that's kind of locked in on that. Could
Sure,
you?
it becomes that.
Pardon me?
Sure.
Sure.
It becomes that.
So, could you tell me or explain to all of us how maybe this $500 could be given to all employees but not built into their salary, a one-time payment?
Well, the district's done that before.
Right.
And
I don't think everyone.
it was given, at that point as a one-time payment stipend, you would say, for that school year. And depending on the finances the following school year, whether or not it would continue. So yes, it's been done that way before. So it could be done on a one-year basis.
And then made a part of it, if we see fit to do so, made a part of our salary schedule.
Correct.
Okay. Is there any interest in that? Okay, that's my only comment. Any others? Okay, there's been a motion, a second, that we approve the required step plus an additional $500 for the teaching staff. All in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. There you go.
Okay, yeah, the next one's, to me, this discussion is all together, and you can separate them how you wish on voting. But you look at, we have different scenarios there to look at, and in the first column, it's administration and professional, and we have the scenario of, well, first of all, the first box or the first area that you see of 2, 3, and 4%, you can mark that out because you just passed the other pay grade. So the pay grade we're looking at now is the one below with the new pay scale. So you're looking at 2%, 3%, and 4%. There's nothing magical about those. It's just to give you an idea, a range on what to look at and how it will affect the budget, how it could also affect someone's take-home pay. Example, I'm just using this as an example. Last year, in this first column, administrative and professional, there was the board passed a 1% raise last year for that group. that group actually took home less money this year because of that. Not because of that, I'll just say, even with that 1% raise, they took home less money than the year before because of the insurance premium increase. Now, what you're looking at again this year is an insurance premium increase, but a larger one than last year. That will not come out until July is when they'll tell us. Kevin, do we know an approximate time in July? We've just been told it will be July before they come out with that. So, you know, looking at a 2%, you know, still they're going to be like making less money next year than they were 2 years ago, you know, looking at the increases. So, but the 2, 3, and 4% gives you an idea of what it will cost, you know, the district as far as the budget is concerned. The same with the clerical and technical. We just have 2, 3, and 4 there for examples. And then on the auxiliary, the same thing, 2, 3, and 4. Last year, that first column, administrative professional, we did 1%. Help me out, Kevin, on clerical and technical. Do you remember what we did on that? 2% and 6% on auxiliary. So last year we did a 1, 2, and a 6 on those 3 columns. Anybody have any discussion on or questions about any of that at this point?
Last year, we did 6% for the auxiliary
Right.
group, and is that the paraprofessionals, and what else is in
Do
that?
maintenance, transportation, I think maintenance, transportation, the cafeteria ladies, custodians.
Okay, so where did the paraprofessionals come in here?
They're in the middle one.
In the middle.
Clerical and technical.
Okay,
And it's in this handout with the boxes. All
Okay.
of that's right there. No questions, comments? Well, I'd like to go ahead and make a recommendation that this year we go 4% on the administrative and professional, 4% on clerical and technical, and a 3% on auxiliary.
Is there a motion to that effect? Mr. Franklin, is there a second?
Yeah, yes, please.
Mr. Raymond? Any discussions? And that is 4, 4, and 3, correct?
Correct.
Any discussion? All in favor of that recommendation, please raise your hand. And all opposed? To Mr. Toner and Ms. Knight. The motion passed. Okay, we're deviating from the agenda, and we'll be coming back in here after a closed session to handle item C. Is that still correct?
I believe item 5 posted executive session.
Well, 4C will be after the closed session.
I understand, yes.
Okay. So the board will now recess this open meeting and convene in a closed meeting. to discuss personnel as permitted by 551.074. No voting will take place in the closed meeting, and any action the board wishes to take as a result of discussions in closed meeting will take place after the board reconvenes in open meeting. It is now 6:41. We are reconvening in open session at 7:23, and we will hear Mr. Rice's recommendation.
All right, my recommendation is to approve Kristen Reeves, Anna Fisher, and Allison Stringer for hire for the next school year.
I move that we hire Kristen Reeves, Allison Stringer, and Anna Fisher for the next school year.
Okay, second, Mr. Franklin, seconder. All in favor? It's unanimous. We're going back to the 4C item, approval of any actions, documents necessary for Don Sutherland to begin his audit, and Mr. Hardy is going to address the board.
Thank you, Mrs. Wright. Thank you for a little bit of time to review a few documents. I'd like to make a few general comments and maybe even be so bold as to perhaps make a recommendation or ask the board for some leeway. I've reviewed the proposed engagement letter from Mr. Sutherland. It needs a little bit of work. I would represent to the board that there's nothing catastrophic wrong with it. He and I just need to make a few tweaks. That's going to take a little bit of time. I also have reviewed the board minutes from your May 9th meeting, and it's clear to me from those minutes that the board hired Mr. Sutherland at that meeting. I need to do, honestly, I like to think I know a bit about the law, but I need to do a little research about what that means as far as your attorney-client privilege if Mr. Sutherland works through our office. So that's going to require a little bit of time for me to do that. What I would propose and what I would like to do is have time to research that. I need to prepare a memo to all of the board members about my findings and what I think would work best for the board. One thing I want the board to understand, as well as the public, they're not my audience tonight, but they're here because they care about the school and the community. Mr. Sutherland needs a certain amount of autonomy to do his investigation and to meet and interview and talk with the people that he needs to talk with. It's my opinion, just from what I've observed, that no one here would disagree with that. He needs to be able to do his job. There are issues about who's going to direct that work. If he works through our office, I will tell the board that I will direct that work. Well, we've already covered this. I work for this board. If it comes to that point, and if it's the board's pleasure and that's what you desire, what I would recommend is that at a future meeting, at your convenience, I meet with the board in executive session under attorney-client privilege, consult about what it is that the board wants investigated, what priority is given to those items, and I essentially make a to-do list for my consultant to come and do that investigation. What I want you to understand is that he will do that investigation within the budget and the constraints that you set and you ask me to set. I want you and the public to understand that ultimately his report, his findings, his conclusions, his recommendations, whatever he produces in the end will be public. That will come to the board. I've discussed with Mr. Sutherland that his ultimate report will not be to me, it will be to this board. And you know, that meeting will be in public, and whatever document is produced will be one that the public has access to. I don't believe that there's any way around that, whether he works for me or whether he works directly for you. That simply is transparency of local government and school business. So that would be my very strong recommendation. I'll be glad to entertain any questions. Like I say, I do need a little bit of time to do some research about the waiver. Let me explain why. If I go do some legal research and come to the conclusion that by hiring Mr. Sutherland previously, there is an existing waiver of any privilege, we can't, if I find that we can't take that back for him to work through me, I'm not gonna waste your time and money recommending that he work through me. That would be silly, especially when the end product is going to be public anyway. What I'm interested in preserving for the integrity of the investigation is his ability to do it. The results of it are not going to be a secret. Does that shed any light on some of the discussion points that we had earlier, or does it maybe clarify why I was, everybody likes to watch a lawyer squirm. That's why I was squirming, is trying to figure out those issues.
Still working. Stacy, did you receive a copy of this document also?
Yeah, when you did, yeah, I printed those out.
Okay, so you've been made aware. There's issues of concern that have been brought to our attention today as follows. There's 4 items on there. When we originally talked about it,
Wait a minute.
I'm not reading them out, Ms. Wright. I'm just saying,
Well, I had a question about the stamp that's on there. What does privileged and confidential attorney work product? Should we even be talking about?
At this point, that's the board's decision. This document is not signed and is not going to be signed in its current form. It needs some work between either me and Mr. Sutherland or between the board and Mr. Sutherland. Like I said, it does not have any gigantic problems. It has things that lawyers like to correct. I will work with him on that. I will send that to the board for your consideration, whether you execute it yourself or whether you direct me to execute it, depending on that research that I need to do. It does contain some very broad areas of concern that he intends to examine or look at. Whether that's a complete list will depend on what this board directs him and how those items are prioritized. So I think at this point, I would say it's premature to discuss that because the board has not directed Mr. Sutherland, what we're doing and what order we're doing it in and things, we're a little ahead of the ball on that.
well, I guess that was my question. The board may not have directed him, but someone has directed him because he's got 4 items on here, so.
I'll give him some deference. He's a professional with a career history of doing investigations. He picks up on things that I don't. I'm sure he has also, he said he's had conversations with at least 1 or 2 people, and he's probably picked up on 1 or 2 items that he thinks he needs to look at. He's welcome at the board's pleasure to address that if he wishes. But I think that final list is something that the board, either directly or through me, needs to have more input in.
So I guess Ms. Wright's leaning towards the fact that we should give this document back to you and we should allow it to be shared with anyone. Is that?
I believe at this time that that's probably correct, purely because it's not an executed document. It's not an agreement with anybody because no one has signed it.
Right.
And, whatever agreement is, eventually signed will be different. So, being that that's been under the board's consideration, I would leave it at that.
Well, I guess I questioned it because Stacy was given a copy, so.
May I ask how long you anticipate your research to take?
My goal would be to get a memo back to this board by the end of this week or the very beginning of next week. And then, as I say, I'll be glad to come back. It may or may not be necessary for Mr. Sutherland to make the trip over. We both have a pretty tight eye towards saving the district's money. We don't want to come back and forth and waste your time or ours.
Any other questions?
Yeah, my last question is your time looking at these documents, or you're going to track that time separately. Is that going to be part of that $10,000 that we budgeted for this project? Or is that going to be separated out? We're going to be.
I think that's a very fair question. I would be glad through my own billing. Our bills are fairly itemized. I would be glad either to itemize this particular topic, or even if it's the board's wish, I can issue a separate invoice related to this matter. It is a board decision whether the legal fees involved come out of the $10,000 budget or come out of your legal budget. I will say this, if in the end, the board's directive is that our firm hire Mr. Sutherland, then part of the course of that is Mr. Sutherland sends me a bill. So I'm going to tack Mr. Sutherland's bill onto my bill to this district. Certainly no markup, that's not the game we play, but a comment was made earlier about the budget item related to legal matters. So just recognize that you're going to have a standout legal bill if in fact Mr. Sutherland's bill or any investigator's bill is routed through our firm.
So what's gonna be your intent, right? That gonna be part of the 10,000, or we're gonna appropriate some other money for legal fees associated with this?
Well, I would, if I understood him, it's gonna be a board decision, but one way or the other, it will be a bill that we have to certainly consider.
I guess it's not on the agenda.
What did the motion say? $10,000 to Mr. Sutherland?
If I may, I'll read from the minutes from the last, I guess the May 9th was the last meeting. Ms. Pickle made a motion to take $10,000 and to use those funds to hire Mr. Don Sutherland to do a forensic audit as soon as his associates are available. Motion was seconded by Rusty Taylor to accept Ms. Pickle's recommendation. A handwritten note reflecting the motion was given to Andrea Bates for the minutes. Votes for were Rusty Taylor, Martha Wright, John McKenna, and Patty Pickle. Votes against were Tony Raymond and Andrea Bates. That's the whole item related to this from the last meeting. I'm sorry, I would just add that if my research suggests that privilege has been waived and the board should simply stick with hiring Mr. Sutherland directly, our firm would still be involved, be glad to render any advice or answer any questions you may have. We're certainly not looking to pad the cost of this, but necessarily, if Mr. Sutherland reports to us and we report to the board, that does add extra steps, certainly much less than the overall budget for this investigation or this activity. But I'm not going to lie, my time's the only thing I have to sell, and it will be involved. To the extent that he reports directly to the board, I'd like to think we would still be involved as far as any legal questions the board would have in that process, but it might be somewhat reduced. That I'm kind of speculating there.
I guess my fear is that, we've already spent some of your time tonight, so we've already incurred costs. His travel time here tonight, we've already incurred costs. So whether the board decides to spend more than $10,000 or not, those costs still need to be tracked and accounted for.
And we'll be glad to do that. It'll be easy for Mr. Sutherland because this will be his sole activity. And to the extent that our firm works on it, like I say, we can either line item it or we can issue even a separate invoice for work related to this issue. That's at either the board or the superintendent's direction. We'll do that however you want to keep the books. But I would respectfully ask the board to give me a little time to do that research, to issue a memo to all board members, and then it'll be your decision based on the information I provided you with, what your best option for moving forward would be.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Harding? Okay, we've heard your recommendation and we're asking for a motion. Ms. Bates?
Mr. Hardy recommended that the documents provided by Mr. Sutherland need some adjustments. He recommends an executive session with the board and make a basic to-do list with the board's approval.
That's our motion. Is there a second?
A motion to take no action?
Let me butt in there and be a lawyer because that's what I'm supposed to do. If you'd like, you could make a motion to table the action. It really, if we're not going to do anything tonight, no action is necessary at all, and this should simply be placed on the agenda for a future meeting.
But we do need a motion to table it then.
I really don't think that you do. If you'd like to, I'm not going to tell you not to, but a motion to do nothing isn't
We'll go
necessary.
with your advice. Any further comments? Everything on the agenda has been dealt with. So this meeting is adjourned at